Welcome you all. I would like to present this report launch from World Bank, Agriculture Rooted in Biodiversity. We are very, very excited about this launch because this content is absolutely needed in this time that we are facing this challenge of biodiversity loss in one hand, and in the other hand, the food needs. And now I would like to introduce Jürgen to make the opening remarks.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to you all. I am really delighted to help launch our newest report, Rooted, which highlights biodiversity's essential value for agriculture and the practical steps to integrate it into the food sector. For many years, we've talked about the impact of agriculture on biodiversity through deforestation, land degradation, and of course, through pollution. And rightly so, because our food system is threatening the very stability of our planet. It is broadly known that agriculture is the single biggest driver of nature and biodiversity loss. In just 2 decades, it has caused 86% of global deforestation. It spews around 20 million tons of phosphorus into rivers, into lakes, and into oceans every year, choking waterways with algae and killing fish. And actually, half of that land isn't even producing much at all. It's used for speculation, it's burned, or it's even abandoned. We do know what needs to be done. We need to scale the kind of agriculture that protects the soils, restores the water bodies, and leaves room for nature to thrive. But every year, governments continue to spend upwards of $650 billion of their budgets on a system that in many parts of the world does actually exactly the opposite. So how do we get countries to pay more attention to biodiversity? Perhaps we need to flip the conversation around. And instead of talking about why agriculture needs to protect biodiversity, maybe let's talk about why biodiversity is good and indeed is vital for agriculture. It's a pretty simple equation. When nature and biodiversity collapse, agriculture pays the price. Agricultural losses from water-related shocks have actually increased by an astounding 65% over the last century, exceeding $300 billion annually. And in many countries, deforestation is displacing predators that naturally and traditionally control pests. So farmers now have to compensate with pesticides, making it more expensive for them to grow things. Of course, the equation works the other way around. For example, every dollar invested in land restoration, reducing tillage and restoring native vegetation can return up to $30 in economic benefits and can enable farmers to grow their business. So look at it from a different perspective. Biodiversity is not something separate from agriculture. It is the foundation of the ecosystem services that agriculture actually depends on. That relationship is at the heart of the report we are launching today. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we're calling it Rooted. This report highlights several big messages. First, keeping natural areas intact is absolutely essential. These landscapes provide the green water storage, moisture recycling, and climate regulation that all of agriculture relies on. We do know that natural forests are better than plantations at storing the green water, protecting farmers against drought. Secondly, agriculture doesn't just depend on biodiversity that's out there in the forests, it also depends on the biodiversity that's on the farm. And we know that landscapes with a minimum share of 20 to 25% of natural habitat actually deliver better ecosystem services, and that mixed cropping systems support more pollinators, which are essential for high yields and productivity. Third, today's agriculture support often works against nature. As I said before, many subsidies encourage farmers to clear land and overuse inputs. Shifting that money deliberately towards conservation can deliver better yields, healthier ecosystems, and actually quality jobs for smallholders in line with our new AgriConnect initiative. So let's be clear. Saving nature is not just the job of environmental ministries. Integrating farming and biodiversity should also be the business of ministries of agriculture and finance, working hand in hand with farmers, with investors, and with researchers. because frankly it makes good economic sense. The choices we make today will determine whether agriculture remains a driver of vulnerability or becomes a source of protection, growth, and stability for us all. I hope you have a productive discussion today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
And now I would like to pass the word to Peter Goodman. Peter Goodman is the Senior Agriculture Economist from the Global Department of Agriculture and Food of the World Bank.
Good morning and welcome to the launch of the Rooted report. My name's Peter Goodman from the World Bank Group and I'm the lead author on the report. We wanted a single word that captured the main message of the report, and I think Rooted does it well. It conveys the idea that biodiversity is the lifeblood of agriculture. Agriculture is really a modification of nature, and like natural habitats, agriculture depends on ecosystem services such as those listed here. And these are most effectively delivered by biodiverse ecosystems. So, for example, diverse soil organisms do a better job of maintaining soil. Diverse pollinator communities mean that when disease strikes, not all species are affected. You can think of biodiversity as a kind of multi-dimensional support system, a mosaic of genes, species, and ecosystems working together. Diverse genes improving disease resistance, while diverse habitats reduce disease transmission. Simpler biological communities just don't perform as well in delivering these services. So where exactly is the biodiversity that supports agriculture? When we're thinking about how to plan land use to maintain these ecosystem services for agriculture, it's important to recognise that they are underpinned by biodiversity across landscapes, in local agricultural landscapes, in surrounding natural landscapes, but also in distant natural landscapes that support climate regulation and water cycles on a global scale. Conservation and natural forests is a good example. Natural forests host more diverse species and have more complex root networks than monoculture plantations, and we know that they're better at preserving soils, protecting agriculture against drought. Let's take a look at the condition of those natural and semi-natural areas supporting agriculture. Recent research gives us a better picture of where the most critical natural assets are located. That is, areas providing biodiversity and ecosystem services, which if lost would have irreversible or catastrophic consequences, including for agriculture. Over half of these critical natural assets are still largely in their natural state and are priorities for conservation. That's the green and the yellow areas on the map. But almost half of this is threatened by potential agricultural development or climate change. That's the yellow areas on the map. Just under half of these critical natural assets have been degraded. That's the purple and the dark red areas on the map. And about 2/3 of these are threatened by agricultural development or climate change. And these are priorities for restoration. That's the dark red parts. Let's now zoom in at local level and look at biodiversity in agricultural landscapes. Research shows that we need at least 20% natural habitat in agricultural landscapes to fully maintain ecosystem services. Some services disappear completely below 10%, but up to 1/3 of agricultural land lacks the natural habitats it needs to support pollination, pest control, and other services. But obviously, with increasing land pressure, we need to identify where it makes the most sense to restore habitats in agricultural landscapes, from an ecological as well as an economic perspective. Marginally productive areas, those providing connectivity to forests, and those that protect rivers are obvious candidates. We've talked a little bit about conservation and restoration. Now let's look at how we can make agricultural intensification more sustainable to reduce pressure on natural landscapes. So how do unsustainable practices actually affect biodiversity and ecosystem services? Firstly, unsustainable practices such as over-irrigation change the state of ecosystems. They take the oxygen out of soil or change the flow of water. Secondly, that creates selective pressure on species and the composition of species can change. Then thirdly, you end up with a less diverse or different biological community. Fourthly, this change community doesn't perform its role as well in terms of climate, water, and nutrient cycles. And finally, ecosystem services like the maintenance of soil health suffer, resulting in a huge loss to agriculture. So we need to support sustainable practices with a solid understanding of how they affect biodiversity and implications for ecosystem services, which I think is often missing. But these practices must also increase productivity, otherwise we'll just shift production elsewhere and cause land use change. Many bundles of sustainable practices such as conservation agriculture or integrated nutrient management do just that. This table, with some examples from the literature, shows that some practices perform consistently better than conventional practices. Those are the ones marked green under the crop type. While others marked yellow on here, the results are much more inconsistent and they're context specific. There's also often a time lag before they return a profit or they have higher earlier investment costs than conventional practices. This has got several policy implications. Firstly, we need to provide incentives to farmers to bridge the financing gap early on. And secondly, we need to invest in long-term local research so that we can capture the long-term benefits and the kind of context specificity of these practices. So how can we finance this? The financing gap for biodiversity is huge. Investment in 2024 was almost $1 trillion less than will be needed in 2030. This figure shows how the composition of agricultural support has changed over the years. Repurposing agricultural support, specifically the 80% linked to production, that's the blue and the green areas on the graph, which have incentivized land use change and unsustainable practices, can help fill the gap. The report discusses 3 policy investment packages to support biodiversity for agriculture, and I'd like to finish up with some immediate actions within these 3 recommendations that we think can make a difference. Firstly, applying the latest spatial data on biodiversity and ecosystem services can help ministries of agriculture and environment identify where to invest in conservation and restoration and where to regulate agricultural expansion. Secondly, advances in spatial data and digital can reduce the costs of administering payment for ecosystem services to incentivize restoration and sustainable practices. It also provides mass data on what works where, and the My Farm Trees platform is a good example. Thirdly, the global market for bioinputs is worth over 10 billion globally and expected to more than double by 2030. We can support that growth by identifying countries' regulatory barriers to entry into this market. Fourthly, farmers have incentives to conserve crop varieties to meet local needs that might be ignored by large seed companies, but hold valuable genetic material, and we can support this through cooperation between community seed banks and gene banks, and there's some good examples of this in the report. And finally, to monitor the impact of investments in biodiversity for agriculture, we hope to explore the application of the IUCN monitoring framework to monitor keystone species underpinning ecosystem services for agriculture. Thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to listening to the panel discussion.
Today we have with us Sotil Ramirez, which is the General Coordination for Sustainability and Climate Resilience from Mexico. Welcome, Sotil. And also I would like to welcome Jason Dozier, which is the Senior Program Officer for Political Engagement of the Secretariat of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. Welcome, you both. Well, we've been here introducing this report, which brings how agriculture is rooted in biodiversity. And with that in mind, I would like to you guys explain what are the exactly impact that you are already seeing in biodiversity loss with the conventional agriculture?
Thank you. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todas, a todos los que están escuchándonos. Para México, el tema de la biodiversidad es un tema muy importante. México es un país biodiverso. Entre el 10 y el 12% de toda la biodiversidad del mundo se concentra en nuestro país. Por eso somos uno de los 17 países más biodiversos del planeta, junto con Brasil, con China, con Colombia. Y aquí solamente tenemos el 1.5% de la superficie global de la Tierra. Y eso hace evidentemente que este país tenga una enorme riqueza que es patrimonio de toda la humanidad. Una parte muy importante de esta diversidad biológica es la agrobiodiversidad. Nosotros en México tenemos cerca de 200 especies de plantas importantes para la agricultura, que nacieron en México, que se domesticaron en nuestro país y que sirven para alimentar a una parte muy importante de nuestra población. Nosotros estamos haciendo frente a las principales amenazas que hay para México. La pregunta de make a case, la última que nos hacen, cómo podemos hacer que todas estas cosas, o sea, lo estoy diciendo a través de lo que vamos a hacer como política pública, nada de esto lo vamos a poder hacer sin los millones de productoras y productores que han estado haciendo estos trabajos de agroecología, cambio de sistemas como altamente, que usan altos insumos químicos hacia los sistemas que en México han sido ancestralmente producidos. Y una última cosa muy importante es que necesitamos el dinero para hacerlo.
Gracias, Sotil. It was a great answer covering the whole questions. So I would like to hand over now to Jason. Please, Jason, feel free to join us.
Thank you very much, Bruna. Thank you for the question. Dear panelists and participants, today I'm representing the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. While the 30 by 30 target, we all know that it's a flagship of the Camille Montréal Global Biodiversity Framework, encompassing, of course, 22 other targets. Let me start by saying that 30 by 30 is not only about biodiversity conservation. The ecosystems that we're working to protect and conserve provide the very ecosystem services that are needed to support agriculture and food security. Yet, despite the clear reliance of agricultural systems on healthy ecosystems, unsustainable agricultural practices continue to threaten these very ecosystems. Intensive agriculture threatens the diversity of soil organisms that themselves support soil formation and protection, which is, according to the report that we are discussing today, worth over $11 trillion. So biodiversity has an enormous economic significance that we cannot ignore. The Hack Secretariat aims at supporting its 122 country members in implementing swiftly and effectively this global conservation target. And by doing so, it directly targets key agriculture items, including but not limited to the three that I will be discussing today: land use change, climate mitigation, and indigenous and local communities. So for the first one, agriculture is the largest driver of land use change globally. Expanding cropland and pasture is responsible for most deforestation and habitat loss, and achieving 30 by 30 will likely require limiting agriculture expansion, especially in high biodiversity ecosystems. However, let me say that 30 by 30 does not mean 30% must be strictly protected. There are several means farmlands can contribute to 30 by 30 if managed to conserve nature. For example, agroforestry, organic, or regenerative farming. The second element, climate mitigation, of course, regarding climate, 30 by 30 is tied to climate goals, and agriculture plays a major role in soil carbon storage. Protected and restored ecosystems can stabilize local climates, protect watersheds for irrigation, and reduce erosion, and maintain soil fertility in surrounded firelands. It also aims to protect the ecosystems that supply critical pollinators and ecosystem services, which directly benefit agriculture, including pest control and water quality. And the last item I want to touch base on is that much of the land considered for 30 by 30 is managed by indigenous and local communities, with agroecological practices often maintain biodiversity and produce food sustainability. Therefore, recognizing land rights is key to achieve 30 by 30 and supporting traditional agricultural systems. This is why biodiversity outcomes need to be integrated in planning agricultural policies and their future investments. I thank you for the invitation and remain available for any questions you have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. It was great to hear from you. And I think that just to wrap up this discussion, what I hear the most is we have to not only combine the energy transition that we're seeing in the field with a lot of strength, but also what we are calling here from Brazil, land transition, right? So we are like moving from a conventional agriculture that has all the usage of the chemicals and a way to produce food that is not sustainable to a more sustainable agriculture that combines the usage of biological inputs and systems like agroforestry that Jason and Sotil also mentioned, and a way to do this in a way that we are working with soil health that we're going to bring us not only more productive in a way of food, but also into a more economic, profitable perspective as well, because this is super important into this equation. Well, I would like to thank you all for being here with us today, Sotil and Jason. And I also now would like to hand in this to the voices that are on the field. Thank you very much.
My name is Monica Yator. I'm the founder, Indigenous Women and Girls Initiative, and I'm also the team lead GLFX Baringo chapter. And I would like to speak about the importance of biodiversity to women and girls in Africa and in Baringo. And the importance of biodiversity is, first, it ensures food sovereignty and livelihoods. Secondly, it creates climate resilience and adaptation. And thirdly, knowledge, culture, and recognition, and also healthy well-being for family and households. Just to explain a bit about how biodiversity ensure food sovereignty and livelihoods. From this, we see diverse diets and nutrition. Biodiversity, especially genetic diverse within crops, ensures a wide range of nutrition. Food, women are typically responsible for family nutrition and are the traditional custodians of seeds. When diversity declines, women face greater burdens in providing variety and healthy diets, directly impacting their families and their own health and time and energy. For economic resilience, women rely heavily on diverse non-timber forest products, medicinal plants, various crops variety from income generating and rich ecosystem provides variety of resources of livelihoods, acting as a crucial safety net against market volatility or climate shocks. Loss of species translates directly into loss of income and potential for women. For climate resilience and adaptation strategies provides the raw material for adaptation. Women farmers maintain knowledge of drought-resistant indigenous crops and local livestock breeds. When a community embraces agroecology and high crop diverse, it is better equipped and to adapt to changing climate patterns, reducing women's vulnerability to climate crisis. Water security. Healthy biodiversity ecosystem like forests, wetlands are essential for regulating local climate and water cycles. Women in many regions spend hours daily fetching water. When natural resources degrade, this burden increases significantly, limiting their time for education, income, and income generation or political participation. With the knowledge and culture and recognition, women are custodians of traditional knowledge. Women are primarily holders of indigenous technical knowledge regarding seed selection, medicinal properties of plants, and sustainable harvesting practices. This knowledge is crucial for managing and maintaining biodiversity. The recognition of biodiversity is therefore inseparable from the recognition of validation for women's cultural roles, intellectual contribution, and in the decision making, women are custodians of biodiversity. This elevates their status and gives them legitimate claim seats at the table in community and governance structures related to natural resources management. This leads to more equitable and sustainable environment policies. Thank you.
In many villages, farmers are still keeping small patches of native trees and traditional vegetables on their fields. These may look like small acts of care, but they're the backbone of resilience and agrobiodiversity conservation. They protect the soil, they support pollinators, and they keep local seed diversity alive. Three things that also help fight against climate change. Yet, food systems across the globe are feeling the strain of rapid loss in biodiversity. Our soils are degrading, our pollinators are declining, and hardy local varieties are disappearing, which is costing farmers and food systems billions every single year. But in rural landscapes, farmers and cooperatives are quietly showing what real solutions look like. They're conserving agrobiodiversity, protecting community-led seed banks, and also restoring ecosystems through agroecology. Cooperatives in particular play a really crucial role in this. They can run community seed banks, participate in local breeding efforts, share climate resilient varieties, and collectively benefit from healthier landscapes while building a lot of accountability. And with the right financial support, these efforts can scale up. Payments for ecosystem services, grants, de-risking tools can help cover the upfront cost of restoration, agroforestry, and seed conservation, all of which is going to strengthen nature and food security while also getting return on investments for the communities involved and governments as well. The call to action is simple. Invest in communities that are already caring for biodiversity, strengthen farmer-led and cooperative-led food systems, and build financial tools that reward biodiversity in agriculture. Because when farmers are conserving biodiversity, they're not just protecting their land, but they're securing the future of food.
So I would like to thank you everybody that were here with us during this launch, and just to remind you the importance of understanding how the usage and the adoption of sustainable practices in agriculture, it's absolutely necessary for us in order to create a more thriving new agriculture system that will not only mitigate biodiversity loss, but also will help to restore this biodiversity. And we could see through our panelists today different practices, and also you will find this in more detail in our report, that can be implemented right now, like crop rotations, the usage of biological controls, using crop diversity, reducing chemical reliance, chemical pesticides, also adopting a new way to create, for example, agroforestry systems that combine trees with crops. Once again, I would like to thank you for being here with us, and please read the report. The report is linked into the GLF Knowledge Hub site. Thank you very much.